Mom told me that if you can't have children, then I should get a divorce.
All right. Understood. I'm pregnant, though.
What?
I'm Anna, a housewife in my 30s. I'm currently living with my husband who works as an office worker. I met my husband when I was working at a food company. As we met and talked numerous times as his company's client, I fell for his occasional smiles, and eventually I was the one who asked him out. To that, he first turned me down by saying, "Sorry, I'm happy you feel that way, but I have a girlfriend." But a month later, he approached me saying, "I've broken up with her, so I'd like to go out with you." It seems he started to have feelings for me ever since I confessed, and his girlfriend, suspecting this, had asked him if he had someone else in his mind. When he nodded, she said, "Then let's break up front," and they ended their relationship that way. I felt guilty for breaking up their relationship, but he reassured me with a smile and said, "It wouldn't have lasted long anyway, so don't worry about it." Saved by his words, we dated for a total of 3 years before we got married. At that time, he said, "I want children after we get married, so could you stay home to take care of us and the kids?" Back then, I didn't like my stressful job and didn't want to continue working there. So as my husband suggested, I quit my job and chose the path of a full-time housewife. I decided to support my husband. Becoming a housewife all of a sudden after working was quite challenging, but I wasn't bothered because our married life was going smoothly and I was at the peak of happiness. Every day was joyful and happy. Additionally, having no issues with my mother-in-law was a major plus. My husband's parents' house was just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. When I found out, I was worried they would come over often and harass me, but that was nothing to worry about. My in-laws were very kind people. Even when I just asked a simple question, they would come over to our house to teach me kindly and patiently. They never complained about me not being able to have children early in our marriage. And my mother-in-law would say, "I love you more than any grandchild. I've always wanted a daughter since I only had men in this house except me. Please let me continue to love you like my own daughter." I was happy to hear this. I loved my mother-in-law so much, and though my father-in-law spoke little, I trusted him as well. However, this warm relationship only lasted the first few years. As the years passed since our marriage, the once kind attitude of my in-laws gradually changed. My father-in-law became even quieter, and my mother-in-law changed so drastically, I almost wondered if she had a dual personality. In fact, this side might have been her true nature. To describe how much she changed, if I say it went from plus 100 to minus 100, it might be easy to understand. Nowadays, my mother-in-law has become harsh towards me. Living nearby, she frequently visits our house when my husband is not around to nag me. Again and again, she pressures me by saying, "Show me the face of my grandchild soon. Isn't that the duty of a daughter-in-law?" Urging me to have a child as soon as possible. She used to say, "Children are gifts from heaven. You don't have to try hard. When the time comes, you'll naturally conceive, so don't rush it." Furthermore, my mother-in-law would bring up other families saying, "I heard the family next door just had a baby. The lady next door is pregnant too. And what about you?" Pressuring me repeatedly. But no matter how much my mother-in-law pushes for grandchildren, it's meaningless if my husband isn't willing. Initially, my husband wanted children, but a year into our marriage, he lost interest. Even if I tried to initiate, he would reject me saying, "I'm tired, maybe next time," or "Don't disturb my gaming." Even when I discussed this with my mother-in-law, she wouldn't understand, constantly badgering me about having children, and my stress built up day by day. Unable to withstand the onslaught from my mother-in-law, I discussed with my husband how difficult she was making it for me. Then my husband said, "I think there's no rush," but he agreed to try to increase our intimacy as much as possible. We kept trying as a couple, but no matter how long we waited, I couldn't get pregnant. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law kept saying things like, "It's because you're not trying hard enough. My son has done nothing wrong." I even wondered if the stress caused by my mother-in-law was making it harder for me to get pregnant. Unable to withstand the pressure from my mother-in-law any longer, we finally decided to start fertility treatments. I thought this would give me peace of mind, but then another problem arose that troubled me. It was about my husband. Since we started the fertility treatments, he began to treat me coldly. And gradually, even when he came home from work, he would just seclude himself in his room and play games or ignore me when I spoke to him. It would have been bearable if it were just that, but he would lose his temper over how I spent money, even if it was just a little on my hobby of crafting supplies. And if something happened at work, he would take out his stress on me, lashing out. When I argued back, my husband would quickly lose his temper and say,
"Do you even realize that you have to think for your living, you jobless wife?"
and go back to his selfish behavior. I told him I quit my job because he wanted me to, but he wouldn't listen. One day, after enduring such days, when he should have been at work, my husband was at home playing games. "Don't you have work today?" I asked, and he replied,
"I quit."
He said he had quit his job without telling me. Shocked, I asked why he quit, but he only got angry and said, "It's my choice." Disgusted with his unreasonable attitude, but realizing nothing could be done about his resignation, I thought to myself that we'd be all right for a while, with unemployment benefits and dipping into our savings. So I didn't panic. However, I started feeling stress about his apparent lack of intent to find new employment. Having quit his job, my husband would spend all day at home. I wish he would go out sometimes, but his hobby was gaming. Except for going to the store to buy cigarettes, he was always at home playing games. The time we spent around each other had significantly increased compared to when he was working. If it had been the beginning of our relationship, I might have seen it positively, as more time to be affectionate, but now it was different. The longer the time spent with my husband, who had gone from plus 100 to minus 100, just like my mother-in-law, the more arguments we had. Gradually, we realized that just having a conversation was stressful, and we hardly spoke anymore. Is there even a point in continuing this marriage? I started feeling like I was reaching my limit with our marriage. I wanted to find a way out of this situation. One day, as my husband was playing games at home as usual, I finally snapped. "You're not a child. Stop playing games all the time. Find a job for once." Then my husband said,
"Actually, Mom told me that if you can't have children, then I should get a divorce."
At that moment, I was thankful to my mother-in-law. I never thought she'd assist me like this. Moreover, I was pregnant. I found out at a checkup today and was planning to tell him tonight. But not telling him turned out to be the right decision. Now I could just say goodbye to my husband and his mother. I said, "All right, understood. Here's the divorce paper." Pulling out a pre-filled divorce form from the drawer, I handed it to my husband. He hadn't expected me to agree to the divorce, let alone have the form ready, and when he saw the divorce form, he just froze and blurted out, "What?" His usual domineering attitude was nowhere to be seen. He looked so dumbfounded. While he seemed to want to say something, convinced that he had to listen to his mother, he signed the divorce form without hesitation. He kept glancing over at me while signing. After we signed the divorce form, we planned to meet later to discuss the division of property. But there was hardly any property to worry about dividing. In truth, my husband had spent a lot on his hobbies. Not just at home gaming, but also blowing quite a bit of money at arcades. He had complained about how I spent money before, but in reality, his spending was far more reckless than mine. He had no concept of saving. Since he had never saved any money even before our marriage, we had no savings accumulated during our marriage. Realizing there was no property to divide, I thought that was the end of our discussions, but my husband said we weren't done yet. He pointed to the drawer where we kept our bank account information and said, "Don't we still have our savings?" Indeed, that bank account had a substantial amount of savings, and he insisted on dividing it. But those savings were not subject to division. Those are my savings, made before our marriage, so they're not eligible for property division. As I explained this, my husband's face turned pale.
Yet he said, "Oh, this apartment should be subject to property division, right? I lived here too, after all."
To that, I had to reveal the harsh truth. Unfortunately, the apartment is in my name, so you have no rights to it. Furthermore, I've already put the apartment up for sale, so you can't live here anymore. It'll be troublesome, so please leave as soon as you can, I said with a smile. I had been saving for a home, thinking that this apartment would become too cramped for us in the future. Before marrying, saving was my hobby, and even as a regular office worker, I had managed to save quite a bit. With those savings, I had purchased an apartment during my single years, so I did have some assets. If I sold the apartment, I could even afford to build a nice house in the city center. Of course, all those assets were from my single years and not subject to this property division. It seems my husband didn't know that. He had thought he could get half of my assets, but unfortunately for him, that wasn't the case. My husband became distraught upon learning that they weren't part of the property division. After that, we continued discussing, but my husband couldn't snap out of his daze. Since there wasn't much else to talk about, the discussions ended quickly, and we submitted the divorce papers to the office. And so, our divorce was finalized smoothly. Several months later, I went back to my parents' home and, with their support, safely gave birth to a child. It was a healthy boy. His name is Tyler. Now I spend fulfilling days with my parents and my beloved child. Of course, I haven't told my ex-husband and his family. If I did, my former mother-in-law would surely storm in demanding to give her grandchild back. My husband, who was kicked out of the apartment, returned to his parents' home, but became reclusive after I easily accepted the divorce. Even when he goes out occasionally, his appearance is so suspicious that he frequently gets stopped by police. It's truly pitiful. I later heard that the reason he quit his job was due to complications in his interpersonal relationships. Apparently, he had a foul mouth at work and was disliked especially by female colleagues, and eventually he was ignored by everyone. Unable to withstand such a situation, he suddenly quit his job one day. Perhaps he was that kind of person even before we got married. The kindness was only in front of me. What a truly deceptive man. 3 years later, I am working as a manager of a craft store. When I became a regular at the local craft store, the owner approached me.
"I'm thinking of retiring soon. Anna, would you like to take over the store?"
I had been thinking about acquiring a skill or a job since I had quite a lot of free time, since my parents were actively helping with childcare. And if I refused, the store would have to close, which would trouble many of the other regular customers. With that in mind, I decided to take over the store. While I was tending to an occasional regular, an unexpected, rare visitor came to see me. It was my former mother-in-law and ex-husband.
"Huh, this is quite the nice shop you have." "Yeah, oh look, this fabric would definitely suit you."
Disgusted by their transparent flattery, I asked, "What are you here for?" Then my former mother-in-law said, "Give me my grandchild back." It seemed she had somehow found out I had a child and wanted to make him the heir of their family.
"You were already pregnant when I asked for divorce. Why did you keep it from us? If I had known, I wouldn't have divorced you."
My ex-husband began to blame me. It's obvious I wanted the divorce. If you had known about the pregnancy, you would have done anything to stop the divorce. I glared at my ex-husband and former mother-in-law. Then my former mother-in-law said, "So, are you going to give me back my grandchild or not? I want to live with my grandson soon. You've had enough, right? You've had 3 years together, now give him to me." Another nonsensical statement. As I was dumbfounded by this, I heard a voice from behind me.
"What's wrong? Is there trouble?"
My parents and Tyler appeared. It seemed they were alerted by a regular customer and came rushing over. Seeing Tyler holding hands with my parents, my former mother-in-law exclaimed, "Oh, how cute! He looks just like my son when he was a child. Hello, sweetie, I'm your grandmother." She tried to approach Tyler. I was about to stop her, but there was no need. Tyler said, My grandma is my only grandma," and hugged my mother. "Now we know who his grandmother is. Can you please leave now?" my mother asked my former mother-in-law.
"Just give my mom the kid,"
my ex-husband demanded, and tried to forcibly take Tyler from my parents. I stood in front of my ex-husband to protect Tyler, but I was no match for a grown man and was easily knocked aside. "Tyler, be careful!" My ex-husband was inches away from grabbing Tyler's arm when suddenly, his body flew through the air. "What?" Looking up, there was my father, having just thrown my ex-husband with a back throw. My father, who is a police officer and was skilled enough in karate to compete in competitions during his school days, had thrown my ex-husband just in time. Completely unaware of this, my ex-husband couldn't utter a word due to the pain, and just looked at my father with a pathetic face.
"Well, if you continue to bother my child or grandchild, I will take further action. Would you like to continue?"
As he showed his police badge to my former mother-in-law, she turned pale and grabbed my ex-husband's hand and fled out. I don't know what became of my former mother-in-law and ex-husband after that. Of course, I don't even want to know, though. A few years later, Tyler, inspired by my father, began aspiring to be a police officer. "When I grow up, I'll be a police officer too, so I can protect you," he said, and diligently studied to become one. He learns karate from my father and is considered unbeatable from his age. I plan to continue watching over my son and cherish my life with my parents and him.